Hello, YouTube people. You missed a lively introduction to stuff. I don't know. If you're new to the meetup group, go ahead and raise your hand in the Slack, or sorry, in the Zoom. Everything Zoom or Slack in my life these days. We got Braxton. We got anybody else who wants to raise their hand? Well, I'll give a demo of how we do these intros. It's just your name, occupation, and something not code related. Typically for your best April Fool's prank. So I'm Ferris, occupation backend janitor at Invite. Best April Fool's prank. I really like doing the post-it under the mouse, but I don't know, people have gone wiser about that. So definitely open to hearing other people's favorite pranks.
Or the trackpads. So.
Yeah, right. Everything's on a trackpad now. So Braxton, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Braxton. So I'm a part of the sales engineering team at LogDNA, a longtime data advocate, really. Best April Fool's, let's see. I'm gonna have to say I'm just a big fan of the classic short sheeting somebody. There's just nothing better than you get in, you're at the end of the day, and your feet are stuck the whole time. So that's gotta be the go-to for our family for sure.
What was the prank? Short what?
Sorry, can you guys not hear? The short sheeting. So it's where you take the sheets and you fold them in half so they go to get in and your feet are all stuck. Short sheeting, yeah. Sorry, I need to speak up a little better.
I mean, and there's another one that's kind of going obsolete with like duvets, right? You can't really short sheet a duvet cover. Can you? Oh, I bet somebody clever could.
We can figure it out.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the group. LogDNA sounds
Thank you guys.
really cool. Yeah. Is anybody else new who wants to introduce themselves? Oops. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, then let's move.
No, but I do want to give my. Can I do my April Fool's prank?
Heck yeah! I want to hear yours.
Because
somebody else has one, feel free to raise your hand.
Because it was fun. When I was working up at the University of Utah, I figured out how to do like set up bash things for people, and so I had like a common bash script that people were importing, and so I replaced CD with CD and randomly send somebody an email. And so people would just navigate around, and then every so often from their account, it would send an email to this short list of people that I wanted to spam. And nobody knew why everybody else was sending emails to each other, and I thought it was really funny.
Awesome. What's the other one I've seen on that I was going to say the other prank I've seen Dylan do was in Python. Can you still do this in Python 3? The randomly change true to false? You can't.
No, in Python 2, you could set true to false.
Indeed, that one's
just overwrite it.
Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Anybody had any good ones this year? Any fun pranks?
I wasn't this year, but I will say in 7th grade, I decided to be a fun idea to take a screenshot of my computer teacher's desktop and delete all her icons. She didn't figure it out. They replaced the computer.
Nice. Nice.
Good. Good old West Virginia education there. That's
yep.
Oops. My bad.
Excellent.
You can't admit it at that point, though.
Right, yeah, it's like, this joke has gone too far. The 7th grade me did not know how to process that.
Huh.
So here I am, 20 years later. Tell all on YouTube, there you go.
Yep.
Well, this is kind of like a random one, but I thought it was kind of funny. It's not like from this year, but years ago, I was on this like forum for people who were into cars. And one of the like admin guys, or like the main admin guy, was a software developer. And so he went and like wrote some code in so that like words that people typically often misspell, like when they're first typing them, and then they'll go back and change them. Like I know one of them was like people very often like they'd put like owned, like, oh, like owned on some comment or something, but they would type like PWND instead. So he like created it so like there were several of them, I can't remember all the different words, but there were several of them that people typically mistyped, and he created it so that every time they did type them in even correctly, it would just automatically show up that way. So then they get all frustrated and they go back and they try to edit their stuff like over and over again, and they're like, wow, why do I keep doing this? I thought it was funny.
Awesome. It's like changing the autocomplete in like Apple stuff now, right?
Yeah.
Sweet. Well,
So I don't know if you
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I don't know if you guys saw there was a Medium post on April 1st for Python 4.0, datetime changes in it. How everything is now relativistic. And so you have to actually go in and say what your frame of reference is to be able to do datetime comparisons. I just really sent it in the chat. It was one of the funniest things. It really, it sat in a nice space for me.
I remember that they made it so you'd have to like click, oh yeah, freaking, Zoom doesn't let you click on links. One sec.
Yeah, that's hilarious because I've been spending yesterday and today writing TZ localize if TZ none to only add another.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know that it's so much a prank as just a bug.
It's a feature.
It's a feature. Oh, and they made it a context manager, of course. Just to make it that much more, okay, excellent. And then I recommend people look up, oh no, I can't remember the name of it. Time Zones, what is it? Time Zone Horror Story or something. I'll find the link, but yeah, PyCon 2019 had a bunch of really hilarious time zone overviews and how to address them in Python. So that might be a fun talk for us too. Yeah. Next section we like to get into is who's hiring. This is a broken link. Let me fix this link because I think it's going to get updated to 2021 at this point. Nope.
Dude,
and
so good.
Yeah, I guess it will, but oop, I'm going to remove it for now. Python Jobs HQ is still a great place to go. They do a fairly good job vetting the jobs over there, and I would feel comfortable recommending it to my fellow meetup people. Tech Systems, Kate, do you want to give the spiel or shall I?
I don't know. Gosh, Bear, she always does such a great job. I think you do better than I do.
Well, Tech Systems is a locally organically grown, no, they're not local organic, but they are
we're actually the nation's leading.
Yeah, they're a tech recruiter. I like them because I've never gotten an email from them about an iOS position, which is to say I'm not an iOS dev, which is to say they'll make sure that they're matching up the best candidate for the best job. And they look at both sides of that equation, not just like, oh, what does the company need? Oh, they need a butt in their seat. No, they need, an actual developer who's going to be putting in the work that that company needs to survive, but also what does that dev need? They need something that's going to be interesting and the compensation's fair and all that fun stuff. So, yep, Kate is one of our trusted meetup folk as a result. And Tech Systems has sponsored a number of our prizes over the years. So shout out to them for that.
And that the industry is turning around pretty well. So we should be able to, do some new stuff for you guys pretty soon. But yeah, we love Python. It's an awesome meetup and we're super happy to sponsor. So
excellent. And then I work at Invite. They're hiring for software, anything, but also a lot of medical positions. So hit me up and I'll send you the greenhouse link and I'll figure out which position to apply for and which teams are fun. And yeah, lots of fun stuff going on there. Recursion, looks like somebody added Recursion over here. Ayla, did you paste that in?
I did.
Yay. Do you want to give a spiel?
Yes. Recursion is a homegrown company that does primarily pharmaceutical research, but
so they're
we
organic, as in organic chemistry. Sorry.
As in organic chemistry. That's nice. But we're also building the map of human biology. So if that sounded even remotely interesting, and we use data for good and not evil, we have tons of open positions, everything from business development to scientific and lab positions to lots and lots and lots and lots of software engineering and data science positions. So the fastest thing to do is check out the link. If you see anything in the software engineering side that looks interesting, you can hit me up on Slack.
Awesome. Thank you, Ayla. Log DNA. Braxton, tell us all about it. Unless one of your coworkers is here, that would be fun. But
they are not, unfortunately. I wasn't sure if this is a Utah only thing, but I'll definitely invite them to the next one if you guys are okay with that.
Oh, that's fine. We've had members from all over. I think we had our first outside the US member over COVID or something. But anyway, yeah.
At some point, yeah, we had somebody from Australia.
Yeah.
Didn't we? I think
it got nuts. I know that we had one person from India. Yeah, but yes, we serve the Utah community, but we also recognize to do so, we serve the world's community, if that makes sense. So
awesome. Okay, so LogDNA, they're based out of California, but they're hiring for a remote only position right now. It's remote only for the foreseeable. It's remote friendly down the road. Basically, they're looking for somebody to come in and revamp their data initiatives, really take hold of that and ownership, build up the infrastructure, and kind of get us all in line and bring us into that stage where you can get to scale. Because right now there's multiple different initiatives going on in different products, different areas, and they really want to consolidate it. So it's really an opportunity to come in and make something of the right now defunct data initiatives that we have. I guess defunct is a bad word. There's just nobody that's in here as a leader, and we definitely need that.
I mean, I think Dylan could speak all about the need for having that kind of effort to be driven, because Dylan gave a whole talk about getting your data pipeline in order and stuff. So this sounds like something like along those lines. So sounds like a fun opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out, email me, whatever, if you guys are interested. I couldn't recommend it more, though. It's one of the best companies I've ever had the opportunity to work for.
Excellent. Well,
I'd like to hear more about what you do there, Braxton.
So my job is basically as a sales engineer. So I come in to explain, really answer technical questions, best practices, those kind of things, and then help with POCs, implementations. It's less coding than I've done before, but I'm kind of enjoying the side of actually talking with people and going to the go-to-market side. So it's very interesting, because before I've been on the engineering side for years. Definitely a big change over this last December. So Python user for the last decade. It's still my go-to every time I do any project. So haven't quite left the fold yet.
Awesome. Log DNA. And yeah, are there any other opportunities people want to bring up that we missed? Going once, going twice. All right. And then this part of the meetup, we like to talk about who's looking for opportunities. So if you are looking right now, now's an excellent time to jump in the Zoom, talk about yourself a little bit, market yourself. Yeah, and oh, it looks like Matt's taking the lead here.
Yeah, can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been a freelancer for about two years now, I want to say, mostly doing data engineering, data architecture and that type of thing. I'm looking to diversify my client base at the moment, although I might be emailing you after this, Braxton. But yeah, I have a background in database administration, database architecture. I do lots of pipelines and that sort of thing. So if anybody is looking for someone to do freelancing, I'm available. I have quite a bit of hours actually available at the moment. So I'll also probably be reaching out to a couple of you after this. But yeah, so generally speaking, anything data related, I'd like to be your guy. So there you go.
Are you open to just generally contract stuff, Matt? Because I might be able to find you something that's remote in our system.
Oh yeah, contract stuff is my bread and butter. So yeah, I love contract work.
Hit me up sometime, let's talk tomorrow or something, and I'll take a look.
Great.
Fine.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll hit you up after this, and I'll pick a time.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, wonderful.
Just a reminder, there's a 30% finder's fee, Kate. Just.
Oh, if only that were true. No, I just like helping people.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else looking for an opportunity? Go once, going twice. All right. Well, I think this is a good problem to have. I will say, if anybody ever needs interview coaching, resume tips, what have you, please send me an email or a Slack or anything. I'm more than happy to sync up with you. I think anybody on the Slack who's experienced is, well, actually everybody, I think everybody on our Slack is pretty sweet. So they'll help you out. Our Slack is pretty awesome. Great community there. Yeah. Community news. Yeah, so Python 3.9's out. I think it's been out for a bit. I think Homebrew finally
out soon.
Yeah, 10 will be coming out fairly soon.
Four, we saw the preview of that. That's really great.
I saw a really, I don't want to say dumb because the person took the time to write it, but they were really misinformed. Extremely misinformed article the other day saying
was it
that
April Fools, or was it like just misinformed?
No, it was serious. And they were saying Python has brought the switch statement to the syntax, which I guess is true if you're trying to use a hammer instead of like, you know, a barbecue grill, because that's how different the tools are. But essentially, if you see somebody saying that, yeah, just run away. But no, seriously, what has happened, just to make sure that we're clear on what's going on with Python right now, is that there is now a pattern matching, I guess, sub language. And that sub language has a case statement, but it is specifically just for pattern matching. So Python doesn't really have its own case statement now. Python is data oriented. So if you want to do a case in Python, what you would do is pass a list through keys. And you know what? Maybe that'll be our first little mini demo before we get into Ayla's thing. So I'm gonna preview what I was gonna show, and then I'm gonna get myself depressed because I didn't get it to work at the last minute, and I really want to.
This is gonna work really well for us.
I know.
I feel good about this. Real good.
Well, here's what I was gonna preview, by the way. Can everybody see this okay?
Yeah.
So this is Blender. Has anybody used Blender before? Or is anybody a Blender expert and they like can see the bug already and they already know what's going on? And no hands getting raised.
I tried a decade ago in high school. I don't think that counts at all.
So I will say something. I am in your boat as well, Braxton. I used to use Blender like just to try it back when I was learning, you know, Ubuntu and like Linux, and I used to install it because everything's free to install, and I just couldn't get around the UI. But as of like 2 years ago, Blender 2.8 came out, and this is Blender 2.9 something, but Blender 2.8 completely fixed all of my UI issues. It's amazing. Also has something called texture nodes, so you can like generate objects and whatnot. This is actually an add-on for Blender because I'm trying to do something fun. Basically, I'm trying to take this cube and I'm trying to make it so like it'll like copy itself programmatically, and then it will scale itself and make itself like big for a data analysis thing. So I'm trying to do like a convoluted way. And I was just doing a very basic, like, I've never done anything like this before. I've never touched Blender's Python scripting. But I don't know, I was getting into it. And so I was just trying to pass this data over, and literally I named the variable data, which is bad. No, don't do that. But anyway, here's the script. And then you actually, it's fun. Once you get the hang of stuff in here, everything's an object in Blender, just like it's all an object in Python. And that makes sense because Blender is based in Python. So this data script text is now the name of this script that we're going to run. And then it becomes this block. And then the rest of Blender is pretty much like this block programming thing. And it's pretty cool, I gotta say. I definitely miss the command line, and I'm learning how to drop back into a Python console to do this. But yeah, you essentially will write a DAG. For people who don't know, a DAG is a directed acyclic graph, but basically you're gonna write out all your transformations. And my idea is I basically want this to go through and build like a super 3D bar chart, but each bar like slowly grows over time. But yeah, too ambitious. maybe I'll get there by the next meetup.
Don't do it.
No, right.
3D bar charts are terrible.
But until then, I am going to do a very fast demo on how to, the right way, do a case in Python, because this is for some reason a point of contention. Oh, this is... So we got Python, and I just realized this is a new laptop. I have Python running, but I don't know if it's associated with the VS Code yet. I guess not. I think we'll do that in the background. Okay, so let's so probably everybody. I'm assuming a lot of people know how to do this. Does anybody not know what a case statement is, or would like a demo of this? Feel free to raise your hand or just speak up. Or is everybody here like, this is just going to be repeated knowledge?
I tried to repress all my C# knowledge after college, so.
That's fair. That's fair. Basically, in some languages, you'd have a case statement. Well, you'd have an if then, right? So if, let's say, foo not equals 19, right? You got these basic conditionals, and you could do elif foo greater than 60. Oh, right. So you could keep writing this, but the idea of a case statement is that you would say, you know, case, and then you would list out each one of these. But in Python, the idea is instead of mapping each conditional at that point, it's better to just represent all of your cases as a dictionary. So you could say, and now I'm going to be like testing my knowledge here, but it's like what? It's our value I know is going to be nope, right? So see, and I can't do the greater than in my head, but I'm thinking, let's do, well, and I'll show another thing. Let's do, if I was to do this, we would get a key error, right? So basically we define our dictionary here. We're going to use 19 and 18 as the keys. And then we're going to pass in foo as this. So something you could do to avoid that is just do a dot get. And this would become your finally statement, essentially. So instead of like else or finally in some languages, you could, I'm live coding. So you could just say the same thing would be none of. So does that make sense? As like how to do cases in Python. The other thing you could do potentially, you could have this as the return of a function, which opens up the possibility of like passing in parameters. And yeah, it's really flexible in that sense. So yeah, and let me catch up on the chat here. Yeah, nothing to me. Oh, Joe has a book. I totally missed that. Joe, do you want to talk about your book real quick?
Well, it's kind of underwhelming. I mean, it got approved and I'm writing it right now, but it won't be out for another year. So yeah, but I got the Fundamentals of Data Engineering. It's going to be a great book, not a book like it in the world. And why this book? Well, it covers the fundamentals of data engineering, like data engineering lifecycle, how to think about best practices in the context of an ever ballooning environment of tools. And it'll be very relevant to Ayla's discussion, build versus buy. And so I thought we'd take a different approach rather than make another tool book, Spark or whatever. zoom out and understand, okay, so how do you, if you're a data engineer, how do you think about the modern data engineering environment? It's changed rapidly in the last few years, and it's going to keep changing. So expect that, along with some digital courses coming out throughout the year on O'Reilly and elsewhere. And yeah, the book, I think it's going to be a pretty big hit, actually. So.
Excellent. Will there be any pre-release on the O'Reilly?
Yeah, so first couple chapters, I think we'll be dropping those for early release in July.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and then the book should be done and available fall of 2020. It gives you an idea of like how long this thing takes to write. It's crazy. It's insane. But yeah, I mean, for full context, I mean, this thing got approved like very quickly, and I don't think that really ever happens with a publisher. So I think it's a sign this is like really well, it's going to be well received. So stay tuned. Yay.
Well, hopefully the fundamentals don't change between now and then, just stick to the fundamentals.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to focus on, is like what's not going to change in like the next 5 years. Like data intensive applications, I think that's a great book. Like that book, you can pick it up today and still read it. You can't say the same thing about Spark, the definitive guide. Like that changes so frequently. So anyway, cool. Excellent. That's my TED talk. Thank you.
All right. Well, Ayla, are you ready to kick things off?
Yep. Can I share my screen?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, let's present. I don't think I'll be able to look at the chat, so if someone wants to keep an eye on that, that would be awesome.
We got you covered.
There we go. Can you see a slide saying build versus buy?
We can.
Awesome. Okay. Let me move the Zoom bar too. I really hate this thing so much. Okay, this is going to be a relatively short talk, partly because I've been so busy thinking about the build versus buy problem in the context of my job. And to continue with the whole notion of context, I'm going to focus on software as a service, or SaaS platforms. If anyone hasn't heard this term before, please let me know. I can go into a lot of detail. But a high-level description would be something like a SaaS platform is a tool or an application that's offered as on-demand software or as a managed service that's hosted by a vendor and usually paid for as a subscription. Typically, a customer doesn't have to deal with installing much tooling or provision much infrastructure for a SaaS product. You might occasionally have to install something like an agent on a compute cluster to communicate with an outside server, or you might have to have your users install command line tooling to interact with it, but that's usually about as far as it goes. So recently, I've been on a team that's been evaluating machine learning operations, or MLOps platforms. This is like one of the latest buzzwords. This would be a platform to manage training, deploying, and using machine learning models to find features and analyze images of cells from Recursion's drug discovery screening platform. And before that, I was on a more DevOps-oriented team that was evaluating some new continuous integration and continuous deployment platforms, because we just were not that happy with the solutions we were using. That turned out to be, we had a good result with buying a solution there. And it turned out to be one of the examples where you install an agent to communicate with an outside server. So not completely turnkey, but still really simple to deploy. The overall goal of this talk is just to take like a high level look at the benefits and drawbacks of building versus buying a SaaS platform. I'm sticking to qualitative information here. I didn't go gather a bunch of concrete data or do a bunch of market research in preparation for this. It's based primarily on my own experiences and opinions. I'm going to be talking about how I think about the build versus buy problem currently. And hopefully you'll find this helpful when you have to think about it. at some point as you move in your career, you are going to be on a team, or you'll have to do some research or help your company make a decision about building or buying a tool. So hopefully this helps you there. I think as I work through this, and at the end, it would be really nice to hear other people's opinions and experiences if anyone's willing to share, because your experiences and opinions may be different from mine, and multiple points of view are valuable, especially when it comes to talking about business. I think overall it's a pretty complicated issue to work through, and it can depend a lot on your company's situation. So the first thing I wanted to dig into is, when does it make sense to build? And when I'm talking about building, I'm talking about building an internal tool or platform that would be implemented with all proprietary code, or maybe a combination of proprietary code and open source projects. I think we're seeing this combination of proprietary code and open source projects more and more, especially as the open source community expands and we see like really excellent projects being developed and released. This could be built on public cloud infrastructure products. For example, you already build you deploy your infrastructure in AWS or Google or Azure, and you have access to things like managed databases, something like AWS's relational database service, or Google's BigQuery, or a message queue like Amazon's Simple Queue Service, or SQS, which means that's one piece you don't have to write yourself. So when would you want to build? The first instance that comes to mind is the solution that you need simply does not exist. This can happen when you're working on a niche problem, or you're working in a highly specialized business domain, or you're an early adopter of new technology. There are good examples of companies that didn't find the right platform to buy and had the capabilities and the engineering capacity to build innovative platforms of their own. And this was entirely driven by necessity. Early blockchain adopters would be an example. I'm also thinking about the first companies to successfully incorporate machine learning into their products.
AWS in general.
Yes, AWS in general, for sure. And I should emphasize that the examples I'm going to talk about are companies that have high-performing engineering organizations that have a lot of capacity to build and maintain software. So the first one that comes to mind is LinkedIn, who developed the Kafka event messaging and streaming platform, which turned out to be a massively successful platform for them, which they also released and has now been spun off into another company called Confluent Cloud. And I've worked for companies that subscribe to Confluent Cloud. It's a good product. So this turned out to be a huge win for LinkedIn. If you've worked in data engineering, of course, you've heard of the Airflow workflow orchestration platform. That's also available as a managed service in a couple of places. That was developed by Airbnb because they needed a platform. Uber designed the Michelangelo machine learning platform. I don't know a huge amount about that, but it's something they worked on for a long time, and they have talked extensively about it. Lyft has the Flight machine learning platform to help you orchestrate machine learning tasks. It does look pretty good, although it is fairly new. And Stripe recently released their Railyard machine learning infrastructure platform. So another dimension to the solution doesn't exist problem is it's possible that current platforms and services really don't come close to meeting your quality expectations. So in that case, buying doesn't make a lot of sense. Another situation is when building an internal tool will give you a competitive advantage. The solution you need would be in your company's wheelhouse, and the people who will build and maintain it have a very deep understanding of the problem you're solving with this tool. So then a tool like that would become valuable intellectual property for your company. If you build it, it may be possible to monetize it. That certainly happened with a couple of the cases I mentioned before, like Kafka or Airbnb or Airflow. But if you're going to go this route, there should definitely be a clear path to get a return on your organization's investment when you're building that internal tool or service. Also, your company should be in a financial position to be able to absorb the expense if the project is delayed or if it fails, because that is a business risk. There are occasions where a tool like this, though, becomes a company's primary product. We use Slack for this group, and a lot of us use it at work. That was originally developed by a company called TinySpec. That was a gaming company. They were building some cutting edge multiplayer games, and they had a distributed development team that they needed to coordinate between. And IRC just wasn't capable enough once they reached a certain size and wanted to be able to share files and multimedia. So they built Slack, and their games didn't do well, but Slack is $1 billion business now. So it just goes to show. If your company has the expertise and resources to build an internal tool, then it could make sense to build. Or your company has plans to expand their current engineering organization and will then have the bandwidth to take on building internal tooling. You may also be in the situation where you have enough existing tools or services in place that bringing them together into a fully fledged SaaS platform or managed service isn't that big a lift and would be easier than trying to go and buy a solution. Does anyone have any questions at this point or have any comments? Okay, pushing on. Another thing to consider is control over your managed platform or service. If security is a major requirement for your organization and you're not comfortable having your systems and services interact with an external system, or if currently available commercial offerings do not meet your security and compliance standards. For example, you've got financial or patient data you need to protect. Although, SaaS platforms that can meet financial and HIPAA regulations are becoming more and more common and tend to be fairly good now. So maybe this is less of an issue, but if maybe you have military contracts or something like that, that could be a concern. If you want to have the ability to prioritize and implement the features that you need, and it's been difficult to get customizations and features from vendors, then consider building your own solution. When it's done correctly, you can get a platform that meets your organization's needs, that's compatible with your existing tools and services. Another situation that might happen, especially if you're working with a lot of legacy infrastructure and software, is that some or all of your company's tech stack are not compatible with currently available SaaS products. Some people are in that situation, so you may not have a choice but to build your own internal tooling. And finally, financial cost. It's possible that some SaaS products or managed services that you need to work with are extremely expensive, maybe more expensive than the cost of hiring and maintaining your own engineering teams to build a product. So then building your own solution becomes more attractive financially. But before you go down that route, I think it would be a really good idea to actually spec out some vendors and get subscription data and get some pricing so that you can verify whether potential solutions are affordable compared to building your own. I see we have some comments in the chat. Should I have a look at them?
No.
Okay. Okay, so let's flip that question on its head. When should you not try to build your own internal tooling and platforms? It can take a lot of time to put a solution, to implement a solution, to build it out, to test it, and put it into place. So you have to ask yourself the question, can you afford to wait until some useful version of the platform or tool is actually ready? Can your company afford the time it will take while your competitors are like sprinting on ahead of you and releasing useful tools and services to the public, or providing useful services? You also have to think about how long it will take to find and hire people to build it if you don't already have a team that's capable of building it in place. Another dimension is opportunity cost. Does building this internal tool or service actually make sense for your company? Will it help a core part of your business actually work better? Will it divert resources for more valuable efforts, like the primary service you're offering or the primary tool you're selling? Do you have enough engineers to even execute this right now? You might also have to hire people with highly specialized skill sets to execute. And when you have to hire valuable specialists, that's expensive. You'll also want to think about how much technical debt your company can take on, because when you build out a managed service or a platform, you're inevitably going to have to maintain it and add to it, create security patches, make design trade-offs. You may not be able to address all the features you want at once, which means you will start incurring technical debt. Can you do that? Again, this is all going to take time. And you do have to account for the time that your software engineering teams take to take on the operational responsibilities and the maintenance for your platform. And you're also responsible for your users' experience. And again, we come back to cost. So instead of thinking about what a subscription to a SaaS platform will cost, we now want to look at how much does an engineering team cost? When you tally up salary and benefits, maintaining an engineering team of any size can go into the millions of dollars. You also may need to expand hiring, which takes time and money and resources. You will accrue management overhead, which also becomes expensive. So it's not just a matter of thinking about the time it takes to build out a tool and the technical debt that may go with it, but also the total cost of ownership when it comes to having enough personnel to actually take on these kinds of projects. Also, you're adding to your engineering team's operational burden. And finally, a lot of the examples I talked about earlier were success stories. And we hear about a lot of success stories from companies that build out technology or release open source products to the world. We tend to be biased towards success. What we don't hear about as much is about the projects that fail to launch, went over time and over budget, and fail to deliver value. So Are there any questions at this point?
For build and, like when to build or when not to build, the way I always kind of break it down is core versus context. What's going to allow you to be as quick as possible in the market, be able to respond. Are you building systems specifically just to support? And even if it's not the ideal situation, be able to grab a SaaS vendor so you free up the time for your engineering team is key. And you're able to actually respond to things that truly matter.
Absolutely. So again, unless you're getting a real competitive advantage, or you're in a situation where a SaaS product simply doesn't exist to meet the need, buying is definitely a good option. For example, you find a tool that meets your requirements at a very reasonable price. And again, thinking about how much it costs to operate an engineering team, even paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for a really good solution is a bargain compared to maintaining a big engineering team. It may sound very expensive, but when you think about the millions of dollars it takes to maintain a solid engineering team, that's a bargain for sure.
Balance though, I think there's an unwritten desire of engineers to do resume-driven development.
Oh yes.
Right, and so
unwritten.
I don't know.
Well, you might write it. You might write it in your resume for all I know. I mean, it's like I do resume-driven development, but. So this, if you have this collective tendency towards like shiny object syndrome, or how do you balance that against practicality?
Think about, I think, both having your organization's best interests at heart, and for career development, thinking about the value that you bring with the systems you build or the software you're delivering matters most. I mean, you may not get to play with all the shiniest tools immediately at work, but you can say, my team delivered this product, which enabled my company to become a market leader and deliver, excellent products or services to our customers. And then we made a ton of money, or we beat out our competition. And that's not to say that working with a good SaaS platform doesn't mean you get to play with shiny tools. For example, if you're working with something like Kafka or Pulsar, you're still building very sophisticated data platforms, for example, which are interesting and challenging. It's interesting and challenging work to do for sure. And you're likely going to be building solutions on top of that. And frequently you also have to write glue code to incorporate it into your technical stack. But again, this is faster and cheaper than building out a full solution internally, and allows you to deliver value to your organization faster. There's also definitely cases where there's stable industry standard solutions that you really don't want to be building internally unless that's your company's core mission. So I'm thinking about services like GitHub or GitLab. Unless you're the company that's going to develop the next generation of code management tools, you're going to be subscribing to one of these or installing it in your enterprise cluster somewhere. Continuous integration and continuous deployment tools would be another example. Building these is really complicated, and even taking some open source solutions and deploying them in your infrastructure can be a lot of work. So I tend to be biased towards buying managed solutions there. It just frees up your team to do more valuable work in the long run.
I think to comment on that too, it's interesting, I think a lot of engineering teams feel that the competitive advantage that they have is a much greater footprint than what the company actually does at the end of the day, yep. Right? So you see a lot of, I would say, like engineering sprawl, more as a result, I think, of a kind of a make work program versus focusing on like the one or two things that actually drives the needle for a company.
For sure. Yeah, another good reason to buy is You're getting a focused solution to a problem that you have that evolves, that's implemented by a company who's laser focused, at least hopefully they are if they're a good vendor, on building this product, offering new features, and building innovative products that you can take advantage of. This is their core business. You are leveraging their expertise, hopefully for a reasonable price. And just generally, if the internal tool cost is much, much bigger than the subscription cost, that seems like a pretty obvious answer to me, especially because it's a predictable cost. Your business and accounting people will love that because they love being able to budget and predict costs over the year. Also, if you want to ruin accountants' day, run up a big spiky cloud bill every month. They will not be happy with you. So I've talked about open source also. And where does that fit in? Personally, I tend to think of it similar to building an internal tool, because you do have to deal with the cost of maintaining it and you have to support it internally. If it's not a managed service, you still have to secure it, troubleshoot it, and it does come with operational burden. For example, in my last job, I was on the team that was responsible for managing a RabbitMQ message broker cluster. Luckily for us, we picked releases that were stable and we didn't have to update it too often. So it ended up being not a big burden for us. But if we weren't being very conservative with how well we maintained it, it could have turned into one. Maintaining your own Kafka cluster or maintaining your own Kubeflow, which is a machine learning operations platform that's fairly popular, also requires a decent number of engineers to maintain it. Kubeflow especially is known for its operational burden. So free open source tools are not really free if you have to run them in production. If you're going to go this route, definitely plan for some maintenance overhead. On the other hand, that is balanced by the fact that somebody else is building out this product, but you have the ability to fork and customize a product to meet your company's needs. And you can do this if you have the engineering resources and capabilities to do so. Also, successful open source projects have active and helpful communities, and that can be a good source of support. Also, sometimes you can pay the company that's releasing the product or the platform to customize it or add features. So that's another possibility also. So now that we've worked through the build versus buy conversation, unless anyone has any further comments.
Yeah, I was actually just going to comment on that because in some cases, the open source is like, even if you get the support contract or you have a team of people like with Postgres, for example, there's a number of companies out there that have great service and it's like a fraction of the cost of, an Oracle or something like that. So that's something that's unfortunately more difficult to get into management's ear than you would expect, at least in my experience. They're like, yeah, but it's Oracle. It's like, yeah, exactly. So it's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, no, I agree that can be a tricky conversation unless you have like business advocates or some sort of evangelist that they trust. It can be difficult to influence decisions like that unless the company is very strapped for cash, maybe like, you've blown out your engineering budget for the year, or you're a startup just getting off the ground. Then I'd say you're probably a lot more cost sensitive.
Yeah, well, that's how I was consulting for a company that really wanted to go SQL Server, and was like, oh, let me tell you the price here. It's a couple kidneys per core. So that got them on Postgres pretty quick, and they have not had any problems since. So
yeah, we run Postgres too. It's a very nice product. there's a few things that other databases have that it doesn't have, but for the most part, it serves us quite well.
If you're a cash-strapped startup, it's like, do you need clustered indexes, or because if you can get by without them, then
totally fair point. Well, this actually is a good segue into choosing a vendor, and the first thing I would recommend is know your requirements. Before you talk to a vendor, it's a good idea to know what you need up front. Put together a list of features and capabilities with some kind of ranking system. Lately, I've been organizing the features and capabilities lists according to required, priority, and nice to have. And then we can take this list and actually turn it into an evaluation criteria, like in a document or a spreadsheet, and actually rank the features after we do a trial. So I find this is a bit of upfront effort, but it pays off because you will have a good framework for thinking about how to evaluate a vendor and a product. If the vendor, and I think most vendors do this, do an upfront demo, it's a good idea to come into that demo with questions and features, questions about the features and capabilities that you need. Frequently, these demos are very generic, so that may not be the greatest use of your time, especially if you're very familiar with the domain that the product is working in, or you've done some upfront reading and already kind of know the high-level overview of what the product actually does. Also, if the person doing the demo can't answer your questions up front, a good vendor will definitely empower them to do some research and come back to you with answers. Another thing to think about is how well will this product work on your infrastructure or cloud? And we tend to like to ask this during the initial demo call. If you're working with something like a VMware cluster, is it going to play well with that? If you're on the public cloud, does it play well with your public cloud provider? If you're on AWS, this is probably not as much of a concern. Very likely also Azure, since that's the second place cloud now. But we're finding with GCP, that's a question we have to ask, because we have run into situations where the GCP support just isn't there. So definitely ask that up front before you take the time to do a trial. And next piece of advice, do a trial. This probably seems really obvious, and I'm sorry if I have to say it, but you want to try out a platform or service before you commit to it. A lot of trials seem to be about 2 weeks long. Sometimes they can be as long as 30 days, depending on how well the initial onboarding goes or how complex and expensive a product you're buying. That 30 days may be worthwhile, but it is a big time commitment for your team. So you'll want to think about that. Try to use the trial time to actually implement a solution you need with the SaaS product or managed service that you're trialing. Really put it through its paces. Don't just do the simple hello world examples. If you even don't even get that far in the trial, it gives you good signal on whether this tool will actually work for you or not, and where the friction is going to be. If you have code already that needs to run on the platform, say you've already spent a year or two building out some internal tooling and services, but need that managed service to help lift your platform to be more operational. How compatible is it with the vendor's tooling? Are you going to have to redesign or refactor existing code? This is something we've encountered also with MLOps platforms, since we already do have some analytics pipelines. In some cases, the platform that we're trialing is very opinionated about how it wants to execute your code. And in other cases, you just provide a Docker container with, the entry point that it expects, or it even just runs a Python command, and that's it. So this is something this is a friction point that we've encountered. Do the features on the platform work as expected? What are the ergonomics of the tools or the API? Do you have to be a highly skilled software developer to use the solutions tooling? We're thinking about this also because for ML machine learning platforms, we'll have data science teams using this. And in the case of data science teams, we have different levels of software engineering expertise. So we will be far more likely to buy a solution that a data engineer, or sorry, a data scientist who doesn't have a lot of coding experience can use. That would definitely be a feature we would consider. Also, how hard is it to onboard a new user who's not familiar with the platform? So these are all things we check during a trial. Also, how extensive is the documentation? Do we have to keep pinging the vendor Slack channel or write emails to figure out how to solve problems? So being able to try out the onboarding process is very valuable. Also testing your vendor's communication channels and seeing how responsive they are when you need help. What's the issue reporting process like? You also, before you sign the contract, you're going to want to find out if there are service level agreements around responding to issues and what their SLA on uptime is, if it happens to be in the contract. If not, that's something that can be negotiated in frequently. And that is something you want to establish upfront. If a service goes down during the day versus nights and weekends, you'll want to have some expectation of it getting addressed. And if the platform you're buying is mission critical to your company, you're going to want to make sure you get those very clearly established upfront. Another thing to think about is how receptive is your vendor to feature requests. Sometimes, you know, if a feature request is small or it already happens to be on the roadmap or other people in their user community are asking for it, they tend to be receptive to implementing it. Otherwise, you can sometimes contract with a vendor for custom development. I haven't personally had any experience with this, but if anyone else has had, be curious to hear about that. But we can do that later.
I haven't, but I do ask about roadmap and think about that. Like what are they going to be adding to the platform? It kind of goes back to your question of like evolution.
Absolutely, yes.
So one thing to think about with feature requests is you got to look at the broader ecosystem of who the vendor is partnered with. So the thing I've learned, because we partner with the clouds, and in a lot of cases, the feature requests, the feature requests are, the vendor has two parents, so to speak, right? So you have the cloud, and the sales teams for the clouds, right? So this will dictate like what is going to be sold. Because if you're partnering with the cloud sales teams, for example, you have a much easier time of getting sold, which means features to get prioritized maybe for AWS. And on the other side, you got customers. And it's interesting seeing the sort of the push and pull between the cloud's needs and then the customer's needs. And sometimes those don't match. So this is always a very fascinating exercise to watch, like what sorts of features get released. So.
Yeah, for sure. Also, at the end of a trial, a good vendor will have a trial evaluation and a feedback call. I think this is tremendously valuable also, because you can ask about, you can get more detail on the roadmap at that time, especially if you have run into problems using the tool or things that, some friction with the ergonomics that you would like to talk about. So another thing to think about is the release cycle. Is it on a regular cadence? And this speaks to their ability to respond to and patch security vulnerabilities and fix bugs, as well as how often do they release new features? You definitely want to go with a vendor that is responsive to security vulnerabilities and patches, for sure. But yeah, also you don't have to wait years to get new features. That would kind of suck. So another thing we've been thinking about also is how financially stable is this vendor? Is it, did they raise a lot of funding? Are they backed by a larger organization? Are they profitable if they're public or private even? But, will they disappear tomorrow? I think is the question. And if they go out of business, how hard will it be to switch to another solution, to get your stuff and move it somewhere else? Because if you're left hanging, that's a business risk. Security and compliance. So
can I?
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
On the financial backing, this is something that I've been burned by. We had a solution that perfectly met our needs, and it was great. And then they went out. They were bought, and the company wanted them internally and shut down all of their external customers, and that really sucked.
Yes. That is something that really sucks.
And so I mean, I've been looking at like the TechCrunch, look at their fundraising, and just look at them as a company and see like how well are they doing. Even look at the brands that they're bringing on. Who are their major customers? Those sorts of things to try to get an idea. I've put this under like a maturity quality. And I think it's something we could talk about too for open source platforms and tools like that. The maturity is something that's important to look at. But for a paid vendor too, like how mature are they? Are they going to go away tomorrow? And then the lock-in that you have.
Yep. Yeah, this is something we really don't want to get burned by. So it's actually something we've explicitly added to our evaluation criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Security and compliance. We talked a bit about this when it comes to building. And this goes beyond just staying on top of security vulnerabilities. If you're a company that has explicit compliance requirements, you want to make sure that this vendor can actually meet them. AWS and probably all the other cloud vendors actually publish documents on how they meet all the financial compliance regulations and HIPAA and all the other health compliance regulations. It's very boring reading, but it's there. You can look them up. So I would expect the same from any other platform you're going to contract with.
This is also a useful feature you might want to consider. So if you need to be like HIPAA compliant, going with a platform that has that compliance already thought through can accelerate a business.
Totally. That's an excellent point, because you're basically outsourcing some of your compliance risk to another platform. Of course, you should check the contract to see what kind of liability they're willing to take on versus what you implicitly take on when you sign the contract. Lawyers are good.
You can also, in that type of situation too, I had a background in healthcare, so I know at one point we were needing to find something that was HIPAA compliant. So we actually reached out to other universities and whatnot that had that same requirement and said, what vendors do you use for this particular thing? And it's like, well, they've already done the the legwork. I mean, you have to make sure that you cross your I's and dot your T's and whatnot, but someone else may have already done that work for you.
Also an excellent point. Leverage your community.
I think Matthew's point at this point too, people like to talk like a lot. So make friends. Yeah. And the data world, like I said in the chat, it's so small. It is so small. You have no idea. Maybe you do. I don't know. Everyone knows each other because they all hop jobs. They all used to work at company X and they work at company Y. So another thing is just talk to competitors. Honestly, like that is some of the best intel you're going to get, because people won't name names, but you can figure things out.
Totally. So also there's like nitty-gritty details about what authentication and authorization tools are included with that platform. Can you use services like a single sign-on service like Okta? It's a real win when a vendor uses something that you already have in place. For example, when I see Okta on a vendor's site, I'm like, yes, we can just plug it in and we get all our teams right away. And it's, you know, we can partition off data. It's awesome. So something else to think about. Also, how much of your data ends up on their servers and system? Is it none of your data? Is it just like annotations, metadata, and logs? If so, does any of that expose sensitive operational information about your company? And do you care? You might care. We do. We definitely do. So that's another thing we evaluate when we're looking at a vendor. Also, just how are tokens and secrets managed? Does it plug into a secret store? How difficult is it for you to interface with that secret store if they do? Is everything an environment variable? That's another feature we do evaluate. I don't love the idea of just having tokens hanging around without any sort of control. And then, you know, finally, possibly one of the most obvious is cost. Can you get a subscription that has license terms and a price that you're comfortable with that fits your budget? And, you know, frequently you can negotiate this. It's going to be a CTO or some other senior leader who will likely do the negotiating, but there is frequently room for negotiation, and you absolutely should. Ideally, you know, this should be a mutually beneficial partnership in an ideal world.
I often, though, too, in the exploration phase, you want to. I think about the pricing model itself and whether that's going to fit, because there is like the usage-based kind of pricing model. There's sort of the seat-based, you know, per user pricing model, and you know, how is your team going to use this tool, and does the pricing model make sense for what you're going to do? For example, like we used Looker actually as an API, and we to do isolation, they do it on a per user basis, so you can add user parameters. Well, we were going to have multi-tenant, and so we actually had a Looker user for every one of our customers, but they do a per user licensing. And so we did a custom negotiation with Looker to say, hey, we're not going to pay your per user pricing because our users aren't really the kind of users that you're charging for. We're going to do it on a usage subscription. And so we did it. We renegotiated that contract to be different than their typical.
Absolutely. We've also negotiated longer paid trials also, if we're still completely uncertain about a product, but we think it might be useful, with the caveats that we want certain features in place over that time. So that's another thing to consider also.
As someone from the vendor side of things, I promise you guys everything is always open to discussion when it comes to your contract or whatever is going on, and it is to your advantage to press.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And you know, it should be a good negotiation is fair to both sides too. Both sides should get something they're happy with at the end.
Yeah, Reed, never split the difference.
Yes,
absolutely.
Fitz brought up a good point too. Like if they don't treat you, good during the trial, I mean, how's it going to work after you've signed the contract?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know you deal with this a lot, Joe. As a contractor, you want to make sure you have good relationships, and that's also true in vendors.
Yeah, I mean, we partner with a lot of vendors too, you know, so we're in both sides of the deal, right? So we partner with the biggest vendors around. So it's interesting. I have to play Switzerland most of the time, which is fine. And that's what I should do, right? But it's and we choose our partners very wisely. Like, we don't choose those who would feel like going to be unscrupulous. We absolutely do not work with people that might, if we have the slightest inkling somebody's going to give us a headache, we don't deal with them at all. Period. End of story. So and it makes the customer experience a lot easier, because it's like you don't have to deal with that part. But I would say, especially in the MLOps space, for example, there are so many companies in MLOps right now. I'm sure you're going to talk about this in a bit, but it is mind-boggling. I talk to a lot of MLOps companies like on a daily basis. I'm sure you do too. I have no idea who wins in this space. I can't pick a winner.
We've been looking at maturity and backing primarily, just because there are so many to go through. And, you know, we did spend like a good couple of weeks just pruning through the sheer number of offerings and, you know, peeling off the ones that didn't look very mature or didn't have like a good fully fledged company behind them.
Right. Are you on mlops.community, the Slack group?
Oh, yes. Love that community. Yeah, there's lots of good data there.
Yeah, good. You know, shout out to Demetrios if you're watching. Start the group, but yeah, it's a great group. I'm glad it exists. But even, you know, it's interesting because he's put together a vendor sheet right now, just different products, and it's a bear to figure out. I mean, and it's, you know, that's one of their big initiatives, and that even they're having a hard time.
Yeah, and you know, different. Again, speaking strictly to the MLOps solutions, they tend to target different parts of the machine learning lifecycle. Also, a lot of them are very focused on training. So a lot of them are very focused on deployment and management. You know, picking what you actually need out of it does help narrow the field somewhat, but
yeah,
a great end-to-end solution is hard to find.
It's so hard.
Yes.
And the question I have too is like, okay, so all these companies, they have, you know, pedigreed founders. They all went to Stanford or whatever, you know, Ivy League school you're supposed to go to be a tech founder. They've worked at all the right companies, so the FANG companies. And now they have all the great investors that you're supposed to get when you're starting a company. So, you know, Andreessen Horowitz, you know, Madrona, et cetera. And so, but all these companies are the same, like hyper smart people with great qualifications, with great investors. How do you pick a winner?
Yeah, approximately 20 to 30 people with you know, like 10 million, 100 million in backing. Like
crazy.
Yeah, right? There's so many that fit that like same bill in that space.
Yeah, I can't say it's been an easy process. It really hasn't. Sometimes you just have to like cut off the research and say, okay, these are the solutions we've identified. We're going to narrow this down to a couple. We're going to try and see what happens. And if the demo calls go well, if we like what we hear, then we're willing to do a trial. But I think for us, it's not going to be an all or nothing proposition. We'll likely pick a platform that meets like maybe 80% of our needs and build out some additional tooling and glue to incorporate some other solutions.
Message me offline. I'll give you a person to talk to. Actually, she invested in your company. But so because everything is so fragmented, it might make sense just to pick like best of breed for this solution, and bolt them on, because everything's going to change anyway.
Yeah.
So
that is totally a valid choice. Like, buy one or two solutions, use open source, best of breed for the rest. As I said at the beginning, this is a complicated choice, and you might end up throwing out what you did in a couple of years anyway. But this is all the content I had for that, but loving the discussion because this is helping me too.
One thing I would add is don't be afraid to learn from the vendor because they have access to a lot of other information, especially if they've been around for a while. I know that doesn't relate to the MLOps space so much, but a lot of other vendors have been established, and you might realize you're trying to do something that doesn't fit the types of solutions that have been engineered, or maybe you're trying to solve the wrong problem, or you're going about it in a way that's less optimal.
Yeah, we've actually learned quite a bit from our CI/CD system provider on things like GitOps, that is doing code changes or infrastructure changes through messages in GitHub or any other Git platform, really. They've been very, very helpful with that. We're using CodeFresh, if anyone's wondering. And nice. we're quite happy with the product so far. We also contract with a company that helps smooth out our Google usage called Do-It. We've learned a lot from them too. We've had calls where we've just flat out asked, okay, we have this problem. We're not sure how to tackle it. We don't have time to research it ourselves. Help. And they help. It's wonderful.
What's that company called?
Do-It. Do-IT.
I look to vendors too to think about how they're solving the different problems in the build side of things. And then this is something in the ML ops where you're like, somebody's given a lot of thought to it, and it's going to accelerate you to kind of bootstrap off of that. So doing the vendor research, even if you end up going with a build solution, for some of those other reasons that you might use a build solution for, like competitive advantage, or you're going to have some sort of control, can be really informative.
Excellent point. Also, we think about the infrastructure that a vendor offers to see if it's kind of compatible with what we've got in place and how they're using it. For example, if a vendor is spinning up their own compute instances versus leveraging Kubernetes, well, we've made a lot of technical investment into Kubernetes, so we'd be more likely to want to go with a vendor that uses Kubernetes, stuff like that.
Yeah.
One of the things I know I've encountered is it's kind of like Capture, where you're partway through a trial and your developers are starting to feel invested in the product, right? And so they'll have this, we've already spent all this time, kind of the sunk cost, so we really need to go with this vendor. But, the trial's there to throw it away. That's what its function is.
Yeah. We've also had the opposite experience where we got so frustrated with the tool that could wait for the trial to end. But maybe that's an argument to stick with a 2-week trial so you don't have the sunk cost argument. It's a relatively short period of time. And if you don't get that far with onboarding your code or, onboarding into your tech stack, then that becomes less of an issue. But yes, definitely frustrated with a couple of things I've tried in the past.
Has anybody had difficulty getting leadership or project managers to allow time for doing trials and research?
Oh yeah.
Occasionally, yeah.
All the time. You should expect that, and then work backwards if it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, one argument you can make is how long is it going to take to spec it out if we make it ourselves? And it's going to cost a lot of money for the reasons that I talked about. So if you can spin it like that, then maybe they'd be more willing to allow it. I find that's worked for me. It's like we can spend 2 weeks trialing the software, or we can spend the next 6 months trying to build it.
Well, part of that, requires that the executive pushing back, for example, understands what the core competencies of the company are, right? So if they can't communicate those things, and if you have a different opinion of that, then it's kind of like the discussion of timelines are sort of irrelevant, because it's like they're like, oh, we can do everything. It's great. And then the engineering team feels the same, then I don't know what the hell happens after that. But if at least the executive can push back and say, look, we do this. That's all we do.
And there also needs to be incentives. I mean, if you're in a director level, building the incentives so that your engineers aren't so interested in just doing shiny object stuff, stock options and other kind of performance-driven incentives to try and rein in activities to what makes money.
Yeah. Excellent point.
Yeah, I've
The
had
sign of a good
success.
company. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say I've had success basically putting some kind of metric on it. So, we're going to try this particular system, and we'll try to do X number of tasks in this amount of time versus what we were doing in Y amount of time. And if there's a difference, great. Then it was not wasted time. It wasn't. It was kind of wasted time, but like we could still kind of do it. That of course relies on this system not being something where it's an either or situation and you can still get work done in parallel. If it's not, then that wouldn't work. But
yeah.
On open source platforms, something you didn't mention, but I'm sure as a consideration is maturity in the open source platform as well.
Yeah.
And it's related to community, like what kind of community support do you have, right? When if you Google for the tool, what kind of help do you get? And, in the data space right now, a good example, I think, is something like Airflow versus Prefect, where they're both task execution. They both can do, they're very similar. They solve the same problem. But Airflow has gotten the adoption, has the community. Actually, a better example might be even just Python as a programming language, right? Like Python is not the best language at everything. Like any specific example, you'll find different things, but there is a strong community and a strong adoption around Python that makes it good to widely use.
Yeah.
So what things do you look at for like open source maturity?
I think the strong community and support resources are paramount. Also, release cadence. We've rejected tools when we haven't seen a release for 6 months or a year. I think pipenv, the Python environment manager, we were considering maybe using it because Conda's been difficult in some cases for us, but we looked at the release cycle, and while it has picked up steam again, I think someone else adopted the project or they resolved some sort of internal issues. The fact that nobody touched it in a very long time was a non-starter for us.
I think that kind of ties back into to the leadership for the actual project itself. Is there individuals within the community that are taking it on themselves to actually push this and go through, or is it just like a side project for people? When you have a few individuals who truly care, you end up having a product that ends up growing. It seems, and it ends up being more reliable and is there for you.
Yeah, for sure. And sorry, go ahead, Joe.
It becomes an interesting machination though, right? Because a successful open source project that becomes a company, maybe, right? So maybe it's successful open source forever, and that's how it is, Python, right? Maybe the alternative or like a VC says, oh, you're a successful open source package, so let's see what you can do and make you a unicorn. So I had a discussion with somebody who had this happen to them, where they gotten seed investment because their open source project was so successful that it's like, well, why not make a company around this? And now it goes from, I have an open source project that is actually really cool and it solves a great problem. You got a good community of people who are contributing, right? Now the VC's like, well, how popular is your GitHub repo? And then also, how are you going to turn this into $1 billion idea? So now you're chasing money. And this becomes a very fascinating exercise, because the question I have is this even a $1 billion project to begin with, right? If you were making like an open source, package for like dog shoes or some weird shit like that, like, is that going to be a $1 billion idea just by the fact that I got a VC investment, therefore they only invest in unicorns, therefore I have to make a unicorn? because that's the kind of thinking that goes into these open source projects that get co-opted by a VC. They're not going to invest in anything that's going to like just, you know, sort of like, yeah, I don't know, make a 10% return a year, right?
Would you say Airflow, because like Astronomer is sort of a company that has picked up Airflow as a managed version, and the whole company is based around that. Would you say that's an example of this?
They have to become a unicorn, right?
Yeah.
And notice Maxime's not a part of that company, by the way.
Oh, he's not. Oh, that's interesting.
He's doing superset and preset, different things. Yeah. But Astronomer, I mean, I would think their investors would want to be a unicorn. I mean, if I'm the investor, why would I want you to be like a $10 million a year company? Like that doesn't make any sense either. And so the incentives are interesting, right? Because the incentive, when I was listening, you know, I was thinking about this today, like open source washing, right? So a company will even open source something because they wanted to get adoption, or people will open source a project in order to try and attract VC funding. So it's become this very incestuous, like incentive cycle where open source is now more of a funding mechanism. You know, so that to me is a very fascinating economics exercise to just watch in real time.
It's a prestige thing too. Like if you look at, if you think about the list of projects I mentioned, those have given the engineering organizations for Uber and Lyft and others, you know, enough prestige that they could go toe to toe with some of the FANGs in terms of publicity.
Oh yeah, I know the guys who did Michelangelo. In fact, at UDEM, one of the guys is speaking there, like who works at Tecton. Tecton was started by the guy who did Michelangelo. But it's interesting now because you can create an open source. Michelangelo wasn't even open source. That was just an article, actually. They never actually released the project to the public, but yet, because there's publicity around because it's Uber, now you can create a company around this and get a lot of money. And so I'm not saying what's right or wrong. I'm just saying it is what it is. And that's how a lot of data tool companies are founded. I mean, several have spoken at UDEM.
Joe, within this context, are there any risks for adopting one of these tools?
I guess not if you take, I think Ayla did an incredibly great job at presenting evaluation criteria for these types of products, right? Whether you're mature or not. I actually think it was a very good rubric. I might steal it myself. But there's definitely risk because again, who's the winner, right? So
they want to make money off of it, and so if you're
Luigi versus Airflow, for example, back in the day, I mean, you're the Luigi guy. And now, of course, you're incentivized to say, oh, Luigi is like the coolest thing ever in 2021. You're going to look kind of like, I don't know, you might look like a Luddite or, I don't know, something that looks like the equivalent. And so you want to pick winners. Like your job, your reputation kind of stands on this. And that's my whole point is like, how do you even pick winners right now? So you gotta be flexible is my answer. Like you've got to be willing to get in and get out quick. So you got to set up a framework where it's like, I pick this observability platform, it's not working, get it out of here, get the next flavor. Because like there's like a dozen different options and I don't know which one sticks.
And I think inevitably you're going to make a mistake from time to time and have to do that reversal or pull out.
It's like investing or speculating.
Yeah, totally is.
Yeah. I mean, because at the same time, it's like you're almost like a reverse VC in a way, right? You call yourself a customer, except you're also investing in this company.
Yeah. Oh, I think about that all the time. That same thing of like, and in tools, it's like, you know, is this tool going to take off? Well, if I don't invest in it, it's not going to, right? Like part of me adopting the tool also helps it to take off or not. So there's that kind of incentive in it.
Yeah. So a friend of mine, she had a good point too. Like, you know, how do you pick winners? I asked her this. She's a VC in data tools actually, which is kind of interesting. So she said, look, you know, obviously find out who's got a good edge, but then think about the overlap. Like what can they expand into? Right? What are the edges that, because you have a niche where you're going to be strong, but in order for you to become $1 billion company, it's like you're going to have to kind of grow the pie a bit, right? So, but then who are you overlapping with and where are they strong?
Right.
So it becomes this weird game theory exercise where it's like, well, like.
So it feels like successful open source tools can stay pretty focused. Like Kafka has sort of won out in that. And what would be Postgres, right? Postgres is a good example. They really have done well with relational databases and having, being able to index it. And it's not growing necessarily into other areas. It's still doing its own thing well as an open source tool.
Yeah, it's a solid, focused product.
Yeah. But then I can't remember the company's name, but they claim to say, oh, well, we have the solution for Postgres column store data warehouses now, because that's like the cool thing to do. So let's tack that onto Postgres. And the cool thing with that is their argument was, well, it's open source, it's column store, and it's OLTP. So you get like the best of all worlds. And you just have to keep like growing your cluster. And I thought that is like the dumbest positioning I could ever thought of. Like, why would you do a thing like that? Because all you're doing is you're writing on the coattails of Postgres, which is an open source database, but you're tacking on your proprietary product, which just doesn't make any sense to me personally. It might make sense to other people, but so you get these like kind of barnacle companies tacking on to, Postgres is like one of the best goddamn open source projects there is, period. End of story. It's great. My opinion is leave it alone. AWS did the same thing with Babelfish, right? So now they have Postgres where you can write SQL Server and T-SQL and port your SQL Server over to Postgres. That's crazy. I mean, I guess it might work. Who knows? I mean, I never count anything out, but it's an interesting admission from AWS that because Microsoft basically restricted SQL Server licenses and costing, they have to take this open source route now. But that's how Redshift started too, I guess. So what do I know? And Redshift is basically just Postgres with like ParaXL tacked onto it.
Yeah. Well, but then you have Mongo, which is the opposite sort of situation where they're trying to restrict your ability. Well, I guess it's not the opposite. It's what SQL Server is doing too. It's like they're trying to restrict AWS from making money off of it. And Postgres is just like, whatever. So I guess they're also a lot more well-established too. Yeah, I think, yeah, because it's been around for quite a bit longer than Mongo.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest issues with DevOps and MLOps is it's just such a new area. No one's really come in to be able to own the space and be able to prove, with the track record of 20 years, this is the best solution. This is the most scalable. It's just people shooting darts at the wall. It almost feels like half the time.
Yeah, and a couple of years ago, if you're trying to figure out your container orchestration system, Kubernetes was a lot more of a risk than it is now. So there was a good chance you would make the wrong choice.
And Airflow.
I brought it to Demetrios and MLOps and some combo we had. It was like, so what do you want to be Kubeflow or do you want to be a Kubernetes?
What is the difference on there?
Well, do you want to be the underlying architecture or do you want to be
the thing on top
of the underlying architecture?
You want to be Kubernetes.
Yeah. I mean, all of these things are about the right abstractions, right? That provide a useful thing. So Postgres is really nice because it's transactional. I can concurrently dump things into it. It's relational. It can do checks for me, and I just it captures relational data. Kubernetes is really nice because if you can Dockerize your things, you have a unit of execution. And then Kubernetes sets up just networking and the ability to schedule or put these units of execution out into the world on a unknown set of machines and nodes, or a variable set of machines and nodes.
I'd say variable set, because at some point, especially if you are doing machine learning, you may care what hardware it runs on.
Right. but they give you a way to specify it, right? And it's, but they're abstracting it away from you. And
yeah,
it's almost more getting to Terraform at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Where Terraform is another one. But yeah, so which of these technologies, which of these abstractions do you bet on? You know, the data space is very hard to figure what that is right now.
I mean, I've had some interesting conversations because of a lot of the podcasts I've been doing. So last week I interviewed a guy who I ended up finding out helped write Hadoop. And he was like one of the engineers that wrote Hive. And now he has a change data capture company, Data Coral. You can go look him up. You know, and so I asked him, you know, what's the future of a data architect or a data engineer? And he's like, look, it comes down to being able to understand the ecosystem, right, and plug and play. It no longer, I would say in 5 years, the discussion that we're having right now is going to be pretty moot, right? Well, in the sense that you're talking about, like having to do things like Kubernetes, like I think a lot of that's going to be abstracted. Google Cloud actually had a very good article, or not an article, but Thomas Kurian from Google Cloud had an interview where he talked about basically the evolution of cloud into 2030, and it's all point solutions. It has nothing to do with the layers that we operate on now where we're writing code. Like people like us may be employed at companies that write code for these underlying systems that produce point solutions, but the notion of somebody writing a point solution from scratch, I mean, that's largely going to be gone unless you have a good use case for it. I mean, think of it this way: do you for your tax software, tax season's coming up, do you write your tax software? I mean, if you do, good for you. You're crazy. Matt White used to be a
yeah. I mean, Ayla's example of version control too. Like nobody's writing their own version control system.
Right.
There's no reason why you should unless you have a great idea.
Well, so the fascinating thing about this conversation I had with Raghu, the guy from Data Coral, the guy, you know, he worked at Yahoo when Hadoop was coming out, and it's like, you know, the conversation was like, well, we need to figure out how we're going to just distribute this data and figure it out because we have to. It wasn't like a cool thing to do. It's like you have this need and you got to solve the problem, right? That's how these systems come about. It's not like this is like, oh, this is like great on my resume. It's like, yeah, we got a lot of data. We got to figure this thing out like right now. Same with Hive. So Facebook had a lot of data coming in, right? And so they have all these data centers, and it's like, how do we figure out a way to distribute data in a data center in such a way that people can write SQL queries against it without using Oracle and using commodity hardware and leveraging on top of Hadoop? This wasn't a known problem. He was doing his PhD thesis in distributed computing. I think had a good idea of how to solve this, but it wasn't like this was, it was get like Hive off the shelf and just figure this out. Like they had to figure out how to make SQL statements against stuff that was tended to be Java-based MapReduce code at the time. And so I think because you're pressured to figure out a problem, you're going to figure it out. And this is, I think, where innovation has come in. Like there's a lot of pedestrian problems in the buy versus build scenario. In most situations, I would say, buy the damn thing, like just be done and move on. But for the exception, and this is, I think, where innovation is going to keep happening, is you have all of us work at companies, and I'm sure we're dealing with customers that have extreme situations that you need to innovate in. And it's like, that's where your attention should be at. That's where the next Hives and Hadoops are going to come from. It's only when you keep chasing all this Me Too bullshit. I'm not I'm following the latest trends, not Me Too, not wave, yeah. But like, you know, I'm following like, you know, Me Too architecture. Like I'm doing Hive because it's cool. I'm doing Spark because it's cool. You know, I'm chasing Kafka because it's like the next big thing. Like that's, I think, where you get into trouble, because you're not, at that point, you're doing undifferentiated heavy lifting, and you're not solving like a legit innovative problem for your company. If you focus all of your attention on that, like you would be coming up with like the next Hives, Kafkas, all this other stuff that companies had to figure out because they had actual scaling problems. But instead, what we see is like everyone just like cargo cults, data engineering and data and machine learning over and over again. It's like all just rebuild Kafka. I met a guy at a meetup who told me about how he wrote a database from scratch.
Yeah.
Why? Unless it's a fun hobby project or
It's a company. I mean,
an academic
if it's for a Jedi mind trick where this is like a great, you need my database. Like, like you should write a database.
No,
it didn't sound special at all. I was like, this is like the dumbest thing ever.
I think the key to career longevity or even sanity is just be laser focused on the value that you bring to your company or organization.
Hey, that seems like a great place to call our meetup. What do we think? We're at 2 hours now. Do you want to do a wrap up, Ferris?
Yeah, let's do the raffle. I'm just fascinated by the convo because a lot of it feels like stuff that I've dealt with almost on both sides. I mean, coming from team, it's like we were a software vendor in a way, and it was like, hey, do you want to set up your meeting room with like Outlook? You could totally do that, or you could use us. And yeah, it's interesting. This is really good talk, Ayla. Yeah, awesome. I'm glad we did a talk like this.
Glad you found it helpful.
Yeah, and thanks, especially at the last minute.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, it's one of my favorite meetups. Actually, it was just because
I think Ayla's swinging into number 3 in terms of meetup speakers for our meetup, like how often you've given talks. Yeah, let me find my. Is anybody else on Big Sur yet, by the way?
Yeah.
I am.
I mean, I'm not a huge fanboy, but I just love these dynamic backgrounds. They're nice. Anyway, and now I want to go to actual Big Sur, which I've never like had the inclination to do. Oh, also special on Disney Plus about, that area is pretty sweet. Highly recommend it.
That area.
Big Sur, that area in California. The physical location. Uh-oh. Did I make one? Why did I set it for the first? I am so silly. Oh, this was 2020.
Yeah, that's from last year.
Wow. Okay. Anyway, let me make a new channel. Sorry. Basically, I'm making this new channel so that we can do the raffle. So yeah. One. Boom. So, and I'll post this in general and give everybody a chance to hop in the Slack and like hop onto that channel. You should just be able to click this link and it should, hi Matt. And then what I'll do is I'll say who, and then we'll copy this and that will be our, that'll be our raffle choice. And I think we'll do 2 prizes today. While people are joining the meetup, let me show off our raffle prize. Got some new stuff, finally, because we ran out of our last prize. This one's really cool. I'm hoping I have an example. Where did it go? Where is it? So, and I think Matt totally gets where I'm coming from, Mr. Kingsbury. Oh, here it is. Felix likes whatever, for some reason, my toddler, he's tall now, which is weird. And he's walking around, so he can grab stuff off any counter, which is, it drains a lot of energy to follow a little guy around. But for some reason, he loves these things, like just this, like, I don't know what it is about this wrapping. Anyway.
It makes cool noises.
I think so. And
yeah,
it's the look too, and it's pink and it feels different. And also, if you click it hard enough, it has buttons, because inside that wrapping,
it's like catnip for kids.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
This is another like Pi badge, but this is the latest model that came out in 2020, end of 2020. Now, what's cool about this is this is the Edge badge, and this can run a limited subset of TensorFlow on this chip, which is really cool. Yeah, I saw Joe's like, you can't build your models on this, but you can copy them and you can use them. Also, this one has a built-in mic right here. So the examples are pretty nifty of you can like build a model around your own voice and like copy it in, and then yeah, you could do like voice command on this thing now. It is awesome. So yeah, giving away one of these. And then the other one that I wanted to give away, I'm kind of have a mixed bag here. Okay, well, let's do another Pi portal. Let me grab one of those. These are kind of nifty. So these are the newest Pi portal. These are 2.4-inch screen, and I will ship this one to you if you win it. And again, you should be joining this meetup channel. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to get on our Slack. And if you still don't know what I'm talking about, please hit up the chat in Zoom and somebody, let me pull it up. Yeah, okay, yeah, just say something in Zoom chat if you're like having trouble and you still want to join the meetup. So this is a slightly smaller Pi portal. It like, you'll notice the form factor is just a little bit smaller. Do you see how the screws are like, usually the screws go up here and the screen's a little bit bigger. But what was the upgrade they did on this? Oh, so there's the upgrade. This one has the, well, no, the other ones did too. Oh, they changed the Wi-Fi. I'm trying to remember what. It basically just works with more. I'm trying to remember the signal. It's not N, it's something like that. And it's not 5.4. I think it's still 2.4, but this is a hookup right to your Wi-Fi. You can put an SD card in here. It is a touch screen. It has an output for speakers. Oh, and I forgot to mention both of these devices run Python. So obviously that's why we give them out. So cool. It looks like Matt's here, ready to join the party. Let's see, I'm gonna do a who. I'm sad. Who. Awesome. Copy that. I'm getting Slacks that I can't read, so sorry.
That's okay.
Does that look right?
Yep. I'm gonna try to add a comma to my name next time.
God damn it, Dylan.
Okay, Bobby Tables.
Yep.
I'll still find a workaround. I'll just remove you from the list.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Noel won the badge.
Apple or something.
Oh, somebody spot a bug? Oh. Okay.
A bug in Dylan's comment, but that's a different
Yeah.
subject.
Boom. B. Uh-oh, I did screw something up. Shouldn't have added that space, I think.
You got to do the choice on the list.
You're absolutely right.
I think he's there. Yeah, he's.
Who had the correct PR comment there?
Braxton.
Nicely done, Braxton. Hopefully you win this. Let's do it. Matt.
God
Mr.
damn
Matt
it.
White, that is.
Good job, Matt.
Nice.
And one more winner. Show me the money. Mr. John Fackrell.
Nice, John.
Again.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
continuing to show up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we know why he's here. It's for the meetup prize, but
yeah.
Well, he
Cool.
wins a lot. That's cool.
Say again?
These guys both win a lot, so it's awesome.
I mean, and here's the other fun thing is you can't blame like a weird CPU seed or something, because this is, Apple Silicon. So it's completely different architecture. I mean, it's not.
There's no collusion or anything, right? So.
Yeah. Okay. And let me just random seed. Let me just make sure this is set. So next time it's the same people. Okay. Anyway, I'm just joking. Our next meetup, I think, is on the 5th of May, a Cinco de Mayo meetup, if I'm not mistaken. I'm hoping it doesn't get in the way too much of people's like celebrations and stuff. It will still be remote. Please stand by for when we make official announcements of when we're like comfortable getting back together in person. We're not seeing it in the next like 3 months as a possibility yet. Just a quick update on that. I think this format's fine for now. It keeps us all safe. Actually, we're getting some interesting people around the country, around the world. So I like that. It's a good thing there. But I am looking forward to seeing each and every one of you in person soon. Every time I hear about somebody getting a vaccine at work or just generally, I have to like throw out the ta-da emoji everywhere and just like shake your hands like you just don't care and just celebrate it. That's my only advice for everybody these next few months is if you're somebody getting the vaccine, freaking jump up and down and celebrate that, because we are that much closer to get out of this weird time as a group. And until then, if you have anything, if you just need to talk or rant, please hit me up on the Slack. Please hit up anybody. And yeah, I am going to stop recording. And I think I'm going to stop recording. Yes. Goodbye, everybody.